So it's, again, you need to not make those decisions in isolation. I think that helps really justify some of those cost issues because there are paybacks in other areas.
Just to some, since I've thought about business schools a lot, particularly in the last year and a half. And the one issue is the business school, and the business school community, particularly in the U.S., and frankly, we influence the world in how business is taught. The business school community is really no different than a large iconic brand that has to change and adapt. Because in the business school, it's very siloed as well. And I think the confusing signals that the business education community has done is you go in management or you go in strategy, and you learn how to optimize for profit, and then, oh, let's add a sustainability class, and that's at 4:30. And then you go in there and talk about sustainability, and it's all siloed, just like Jim said. And the students left with a quandary of, how does this make sense? And one of the things that I think business school community is trying to do in this country, many of the most progressive business schools in this country are trying to do is integrate that and hold those profs accountable, where they have to confront themselves with each other in front of the students. And that's where the magic is happening in terms of business education, and the invention, the creativity, the imagination, the spark of solutions are coming from the business school community. And there's a number of schools that are doing this in a great way. So.
And Tom, just to give a point on that, if you just look at it from a purely financial perspective of 18 months ago with the BP accident, there's what was the capital requirement to fix the well before it blew? Well, everyone focused on the fact that it cost them $20 billion in hard costs afterwards. So getting what Jim's saying about quantifying, what about qualitative? Well, everyone missed the fact that BP actually lost $81 billion in market cap in 2 weeks after. And that was all qualitative people saying, I don't want to part this company.
And to tie qualitative, so to make the qualitative element more quantitative, is I embed all that qualitative value now into the carbon price. So really, how important brand is for mitigating risk now is built into that carbon price, so that when the business groups start to embed that in cost in their long-term planning, they're starting to think that way, and it gives them a way to think more quantitatively about this qualitative. So that's where I try to make up for which direction.
So, please, let's go David first.
I had a kind of interesting conundrum that we have working in owner-occupied versus leased buildings. Energy efficiency can't get the needle in private big buildings that are multi-tenanted to go forward. In owner-occupied, you guys are adapting things like metering competitions of watts per square foot and BTUs versus root per square foot. How are we going to break through in multi-tenanted buildings and get the needle moved on getting deep retrofits in those?
That is one of our greatest challenges, I think. And I was in Phoenix 2 weeks ago speaking at the International Conference of Shopping Centers, the ICSC, their green group, and that was one of the primary topics of conversation, is that relationship between landlord and tenants, and how you can elevate both of them through sustainability, as opposed to it costing one party to the benefit of the other party. And it's a big challenge, and especially with these multi-year leases that everyone hates to break. One of the opportunities that we've really been trying to focus on, where we are a tenant in a landlord-owned space, is really trying to create a system of sub-metering our activities. Is what speaking to the choir here, but what we've really seen is that in a lot of traditional leases, we pay a flat occupancy cost. So that covers the lease, it covers the utilities, it covers the trash, the energy, the water, all these different things. And when Starbucks made this commitment to green buildings and actually started deploying these green buildings into these tenant spaces, our landlords are getting all the benefits. So if we put in efficient lighting, or we put in water reduction technologies, but we're operating a space with a flat occupancy cost, the landlord's getting all the benefits associated with that. And so what we've really been trying to do recently, as we're signing new leases and renegotiating leases, is asking our landlords to sub-meter us, so that we are both benefited and penalized for our resource usage in the stores, and trying to get them to really create that mechanism for doing that. I just took a tour of SeaTac, and it was great because they have this cool program with their concessionaires out there, where all the concessionaires have this little key fob, and this is a new program, when they go to dispose of their trash, they swipe their key fob, and it actually measures the amount of garbage that each concessionaire is generating, and it charges them based on that. So instead of saying, here's a giant dumpster, have at it, which unfortunately doesn't drive a lot of sustainability, they're actually being charged back and actually being forced to make decisions around that. It's fascinating to see technology integrated into this conversation around sustainability, and that creates what I was talking about, that mutual benefit between landlord and tenant that we're all looking for. Because the last thing we can do is say, go to a landlord and say, just give me a green lease, because they're just going to push back. But that's definitely a difficult issue, I think, for people that operate in malls, people operating in sustainability.
So take your Starbucks cups and go to Hudson Booksellers and throw it away.
Recycle.
Disruptive change, which is what you're talking about, can come from many places in any kind of market or any kind of community. And it has fascinated me for some years that all of the best stuff that I've been able to see is coming out of the corporate world in this area, and it isn't coming from policy, and it isn't coming from education. It's coming from the last people that in the old days anybody green ever thought would behave in a way that would match those values, and it's because of the brilliance about this and the fabulousness is that it can tie to very much improved returns and branding, and it's just terrific. However, let's talk about silos. It still feels like we have all these terrific corporate people now who are operating and just going on because we have no national policies on these things. You guys are stuck with some states doing stuff, some aren't. Bigger global markets that are ahead of where the United States is. So my question is, and I want you to give me the answer I want. It's the work that you're doing, beginning to seep backwards into our political discussion on a federal level. I understand states are operating in their own unique ways, which they always do. So forward thinking, some not. But the real difference in the way markets behave happen when there are big leaps forward across the board. And right now this is all fabulous competitive stuff you guys are doing. So you're looking good in your own industries as early adopters, and you're already so far ahead, you'll keep doing that. That's not going to be a problem. But the rest of the United States is lagging. And it's because, so is any of what you're doing, getting back into now that the election year is done, is anything going to be getting back into the policy setting on the big level?
So what answer are you looking for?
I want you to say yes. But please tell me the truth.
I mean, my belief, and I think my company's belief, is that the triumvirate of successful corporations, government policy, and civil society is essential to sustainability. And what we've seen is one leg of that stool kind of falling apart. And so, because we believe a strong policy is essential to moving forward, and you're right, I mean, companies will continue to innovate, will continue to do that, and we're very good at that. But there's still a significant portion, a significant population of the corporate world that waits for regulation before they take action, and there always will be, and that's okay. So the need for good policy around climate or whatever issue you want to be talking about, we believe is essential. So we've been very engaged from the beginning on federal climate policy as a company. Really one of the few pillars that we lobby the federal government on is progressive climate policy, because again, we believe there's a risk to our business in the future moving forward. So selfishly, we're focusing on climate policy that will actually help the Arabica coffee bean continue to exist in the future. But also, because carbon knows no borders, it doesn't really matter if it's Starbucks or Microsoft or McKinsey or anyone else reducing their footprint. There's all benefit associated with that, and conversely, there's all costs associated with that. So the answer is yes. Policy is essential, and it's an essential part of that conversation. Yes, we're making inroads, I think, to that conversation, and the conversation we try to have with policymakers is I'm here as a business to give you political cover, and that's really as simple as it needs to be, because there's always folks that will never vote for progressive environmental issues. Kevin alluded to those. There's always folks that will vote for it, but there's a key group of elected officials on Capitol Hill who can be swayed to vote for good issues if they know that they have the political backing to do that. And what Starbucks is really committed to those folks is to say, look, if you're going to make a tough decision that you may feel like that could be an issue with some of your constituencies, we're here to back you up, literally. I will stand up on the stage with you as you make an announcement,